Hey everyone, my name is Kendall, and this is my presentation on public transportation. So to start, we have a quote that says, "A developed country isn't a place where the poor have cars, it's where the rich use public transportation," which this really just highlights the importance of using public transportation in a developed society. So then what is public transportation? Public transportation can be defined as transportation by a conveyance that provides regular and continuing general or special transportation to the public. So this can mean anything like trains, subways, taxi services, anything like that. So here are some policies surrounding public transit. First, we have the National Transit Database Program. This is the main source for information and statistics on the US transit systems. It's a self-reported database, so 850 transit providers report their data yearly. And then this is used to allocate funds to transit agencies in urbanized areas. So it is so huge that many providers use this database. And then we also have TIFIA, and through TIFIA, federal assistance is provided in the forms of loans and guarantees to finance transportation projects. Um, and this is huge because it helps complete larger projects that have insecure funding and uncertain timelines. So basically, the money from TIFIA can help to reinvigorate projects that have either been abandoned or paused due to lack of funding, resources, etc. And then lastly, we have the RRIF, which has to do with railroads and infrastructure. So through this, the Department of Transportation can provide direct loans to finance railroad development, um, which means that basically we can build new railroads, improve what's already there, um, develop railroad facilities, and through this money, railroad services can also refinance existing debt. And at the same time, loans from RRIF have a low interest rate and are also repayable up to 35 years, which is super unique to this program. Typically, they're only repayable for a much smaller amount of time. So then we have our Secretary of Transportation. I just talked about the Department of Transportation, so I thought it was appropriate to mention Pete Buttigieg, who was the former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, and he is also a Democrat. He, or just the Secretary of Transportation in general, helps to create federal transportation policy. They help to negotiate international transportation agreements between other countries and the US. They enforce airline regulations and making sure that um, airlines are held to a standard of how they treat consumers. And then they also work on highway administration. So my articles talked a lot about the pros and cons of public transportations. One of the biggest pros is that they provide transportation for 11% of American adults, especially inner city commuters, the disabled population, welfare recipients, or people in a low socioeconomic status, and senior citizens who are unlikely to be able to drive. Public transportation also has to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Welfare Reform Acts. So this is why it's super accessible, because it's cheap and accessible to people with disabilities. Public transportation also reduces air pollution. One of the articles I read had a quote that said, "The land used to support a private automobile transportation system results in a larger EF, or ecological footprint, than a public transportation system." And then reducing carbon emissions happens by 45% per trip. So if you were to take a car, you would use 45% more carbon than if you were to take, say, like a subway. Public transportation also mitigates traffic production. For an example, in New York City, if there were no subways, there would be almost a 50% increase in cars on the road, which would make it incredibly difficult to get around. They allow for flexibility in everyday life by allowing people to reach further than they would if they didn't have access to transportation at all. And then they also promote a healthier lifestyle. Mainly, there are health benefits seen in men, and then there is research still being done on the health benefits of public transportation for women. And then some cons are that some transport systems are deficient. 31% of Americans in major cities report being dissatisfied with their transit for any number of reasons. This can include lack of information about when the transit will arrive, how long wait times are, or other safety concerns. And then, like I said, they can be an unreliable source, or have long wait times. Um, The average wait for public transit across the US is 40 minutes, which if that were to happen daily, it would add up to 150 hours yearly, which is multiple days of your life lost a year waiting for public transportation. And then especially recently, there have been public health concerns surrounding public transportation, just because of the COVID-19 outbreak, and especially that there's no more mask mandate. A lot of people are really nervous to use public transportation. And then just to highlight some of those current problems again, only half of our households in the US have access to public transportation, which can be an issue if a family doesn't own a car. Majority of entry-level jobs are only accessible by car and then not by transit as well. There is inadequate government funding to expand upon and to develop our current transit programs. And then once again, they're often congested and overcrowded and have long wait times. And then there is not enough currently to support our growing elderly and disabled populations. So another one of my articles highlights the big government's war against public transportation. So for one, by creating highway policy, more of our budget was allocated to focusing on building roads, and it was taken away from focusing on public transit, which was used by millions of Americans. And today, federal road spending is 4 times that of transit, when really what we need to focus on building is more transit and less on our highway system at this point. Then transit is unaffordable. Half of the federal budget goes to labor costs, and then a third of the federal budget yearly goes to complying with the Americans with Disabilities Act, excuse me. So right there, we're already losing a large portion of our budget to things that are required to pay for rather than actually focusing on buying materials and such. And then big government also will attack cities. This basically just means that they will encourage suburb growth and encourage people to move out of the cities. However, at this point, people aren't really moving out of the cities, and by just putting money into highways and suburbs and building jobs in the suburbs rather than building jobs and working on transit in the cities, they're harming those urban populations. And then for the National Association of Social Workers Code of Ethics, this is a set of standards that guide the professional conduct of social workers. There are 6 core values within this code, which are service, social justice, worthiness of person, value of relationships, integrity, competence. I said that the current public transportation system violates ethical responsibility to our broader society just because it does not promote the general welfare / development of urban communities, nor does it promote the access of necessary resources, employment, and opportunities. And then my question for discussion is, why is public transportation so underfunded when it appears necessary to many of our citizens? And yeah, these are my sources. Thank you for listening to my presentation.